Communication starts from birth. Children use facial expressions, gestures, and sounds to let us know how they are feeling. Communication skills begin to emerge in the earliest months of life, but take years to fully develop. During this period, children often face challenges and frustration in their attempts to have their needs, ideas, and questions understood. Adults, too, are challenged to interpret the wide range of sounds, expressions, and body movements that very young children use to communicate. The complexity of language input, how rich and descriptive our language is during interactions with children, is a significant factor that influences the development of the area of the brain related to language. The research indicates that very young children are learning from events early in life. In fact, these experiences are vital for their language development, and that children's early mastery of language requires learning in a social context. The back and forth of language learning makes input from and responses by parents and other caregivers critical to development. In short, success in school begins in infancy and through interaction with others. Communication skills begin long before young children speak their first word. In fact, the fetus can hear external sounds in utero and recognize and prefer the sound of the mother's voice starting when she's around 7 months or 30 weeks pregnant. Let's begin by thinking about how babies communicate from birth up to the time when they say their first word. When babies are born, they are not yet able to communicate with intention. They use reflexive communication to share their needs and emotional state with caregivers. Can you guess at the difference between intentional communication and reflexive communication? Intentional communication means that we are speaking with awareness of our purpose and goal. We are working to get a specific message across to our conversation partner. Babies have not yet developed the cognitive ability to generate and communicate a message in this way. Reflexive communication includes vocalizations, body movements, and facial expressions that babies use in response to pleasure or discomfort. Initially, these are involuntary and in response to stimulus, like being cold or wet or experiencing gas pains. Parents learn to recognize the unique sounds and cues of their own infants through daily caregiving activities. This takes time and careful observation as babies are using different sounds in these early months to communicate. Babies may also use a variety of cries to communicate various needs. Over time, parents and caregivers may notice that babies have a hungry cry, a tired cry, and a bored cry. By about 6 weeks, babies begin to smile and coo. They also start to smile in interactions with others, called the social smile, for this reason. By 8 weeks or 2 months, babies are cooing quite a bit, making little sounds, usually little vowel sounds like ah, ah, or ooh, ooh. By 3 to 4 months, babies start to laugh. Beginning at about 6 months, babies produce a more complex set of sounds called babbling. Babbling is when babies combine a consonant and vowel sounds such as gaga, da-da, or ba-ba. These sounds don't have any meaning. What you're hearing is the baby practicing the sounds that are used and necessary in his home language or languages. While babies appear to be helpless and dependent, they are actually very engaged in back and forth interactions with their caregivers. This is the foundation of intentional communication, learning that your sounds and actions can elicit a response from the other person. Beginning at about 2 months old, babies even begin to wait their turn in back and forth interactions with loved adults, waiting to respond until after the adult has made a sound or movement. Parents notice their baby's vocalizations. Research shows that parents make some response to 30 to 50% of their infants' sounds. By as early as 5 months old, babies have learned that not just their cries, but other sounds elicit a response from their parents. This means they now know that their sounds have a social effect on their caregivers, that by making a sound, they can get their parents to do something in return, such as smile, say something, or make physical contact. This type of back and forth conversation, with the baby producing non-cry sounds and the parent responding, has an effect on the children's long-term developmental outcomes. In general, the more responsive parents are to their baby's vocalizations, the larger babies' vocabularies are at 15 months. Another important way that parents support their infants' communication skills is how they talk to their babies. Parents typically talk in a high, sing-songy, slower, exaggerated voice, using shorter, simpler, and repetitive statements, and a tendency to use the third person, "Mommy loves you," instead of "I love you." This type of language is known as Parentese because it includes the type of speech patterns that parents and caregivers naturally use most frequently with young babies. Although we call it Parentese, anyone can use this type of speech with babies, including teachers, home visitors, and family members such as grandparents. Researchers also refer to it as infant-directed speech. Parentese is used around the world, yet no one teaches adults to talk like this. We seem to do it quite subconsciously, and that's a good thing, as babies prefer Parentese to other speech patterns. Babies will typically respond with widened eyes, a soft expression, and a direct gaze to adults using infant-directed speech. Why do babies prefer Parentese? It may be because babies process visual and auditory information more slowly. So when parents exaggerate their facial expressions and voice, it provides more input to help babies tune in to what the adult is saying. Babies notice speech patterns used by their parents and caregivers, and research shows that the use of Parentese affects and stimulates the brain. Babies who listen to their mothers using Parentese, even while they are asleep, experience increased blood flow to the frontal area of their brains. But we don't use Parentese forever. In fact, its use typically peaks between 4 and 6 months old and gradually decreases over time until children are about 2 years old. The patterns of Parentese seem to help babies with discriminating vowel sounds and syllables, as well as segmenting and recognizing words. Research on how babies' brains react to language found that the motor part of the brain lights up when babies listen to speech sounds, indicating that they are trying to mimic or respond to the sounds. Researcher Patricia Kuhl concluded that adults' use of Parentese is a good way to promote both babies' growing social skills and their language skills. Parentese may also increase brain activity and attention to important or meaningful words during a parent-child interaction. In general, the research supports that the idea that infant-directed speech plays an important role in language acquisition. In fact, one important research study found that the more babies heard Parentese at 12 months old, the more they babbled, and the larger their vocabulary was at 24 months old. Another important communication strategy that babies use is their gaze. Many parts of the brain are involved in processing what we see when we gaze at a person or object, including specific regions of the temporal lobe and the amygdala. In adult-child interactions, adults often talk about nearby people, objects, and animals such as the family pet. Often they will look in the direction of Sparky the dog while they're talking about him. This gaze, which we as adults use without thinking as a natural part of our nonverbal communication, provides a very useful cue to infants about what the words Sparky and dog mean and refer to. Animal research with monkeys implies that it is the superior temporal sulcus in the temporal lobe that processes cues about the direction of the attention of others. Neural cells in this area respond to where our conversation partner is directing his or her attention. The ability to follow an adult's gaze begins at approximately 6 months old. By 10 to 11 months old, babies master joint attention. Imagine a baby who shifts her gaze to a colorful conch shell sitting on a nearby shelf. Then she shifts her gaze back to you and emits a string of babbles. Gaba ba 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 ba. Well, what would you do? Probably you would take the baby to the shell so she could see it better, let the baby touch it, or tell the baby what the shell is. This illustrates the power of joint attention, which is a baby's growing ability to use behaviors, gazing, pointing, and vocalizing, to respond to or initiate an interaction with another person about a toy, object, or activity. It involves 3 elements: the baby, the adult, and an object. Joint attention is different than seeking attention. Joint attention is all about sharing something of interest with another person. The baby was initiating joint attention, encouraging her caregiver to share the experience of gazing at the shell. Babies can also respond to your bid for joint attention, like when you hold a baby to the window and point to the truck rolling down the street. Look at the garbage truck. Joint attention first begins to emerge at about 10 months old and is usually mastered by the end of the first year. This is right about the same time frame that babies begin to communicate with intention or with a specific message or goal in mind. Recent research shows that joint attention initiated by others, like parents or caregivers, activates the visual, attention, and social processing areas of the baby's brain. Joint attention initiated by the baby activates areas related to social learning, decision-making, emotions, and reward processes. This tells us that joint attention is important for communication as well as cognitive and social emotional development. Joint attention also supports the development of cognitive skills such as learning through imitation and social referencing. Social referencing refers to a baby's tendency to look toward his caregiving adults for information about how to interpret a situation. Joint attention also predicts children's later communication skills. In fact, gaze following ability at 10 months old has been found to predict children's vocabularies at 2 years old. Responding to an adult's efforts to establish joint attention at 9 months old predicts a child's receptive language, what he can understand, and expressive language, what he can communicate at 24 months old. Initiating joint attention using gaze to direct an adult's attention to an object at 9, 12, and 18 months old predicts an infant's expressive language skills at 24 months old. This research tells us that caregivers' participation in joint attention is critical to helping stimulate healthy brain and language development. This is also a reminder that just by following a baby's lead, showing interest in what she's interested in, or by showing her something interesting in the world around you, you are helping her build important brain connections.